Georgia's 100-mile coastal region is an ecological wonder. Almost one-third of the tidal marshes found on the entire East Coast are located here. This extraordinary ecosystem made Georgia an ideal place for the cultivation of rice. When Savannah was founded in 1733, slavery was forbidden. But in 1755, bowing to pressure from wealthy South Carolina planters, the trustees lifted the ban on slavery. And for the next 100 years, slave-based labor would be the foundation of Georgia's agricultural economy. Some of these slaves were brought to the barrier island of Sapelo.
So my journey begins on Sapelo. Beautiful beach, and no one was there but just us few. And they pointed toward Africa, which was nothing but water. And they said, "You're here on Sapelo, but your ancestors, Griffin Lotson, look across the water. And the only thing that you see, and the only thing in between here is Africa."
After the Civil War and emancipation, many of the former slaves regarded Sapelo as their home and chose to remain there, acquire property, and raise their families. As always, the church was the center of their community, and a good example of this is the First African Baptist Church on Sapelo Island.
The religion we adopted, which was the Christian religion. Believe it or not, we first got a lot of our American religion from the Methodists and the Baptists. So we wanted mainstream. And of course we wanted to be like the slave masters and the owners. They believed in Jesus and they were doing real well. So we want to do well too. Maybe if we can learn a little bit about this Jesus person, and because the slave masters, they may have owned us, but they loved God and they went to church. So we would go and maybe sit in certain parts of the church so we can get Jesus. So then it came a time that we wanted to have our own church so we can worship in freedom. So you got the first African Baptist church. We built it ourselves, our ancestors. Storm would come, maybe tear the building down or whatever, but we'll build again because we wanted God, save up our money. And religion is a major part of our culture.
One of the most prominent plantations on the Georgia coast was the Broadfield Hoffel Plantation.
Hi, my name is Faye Coward. I'm a ranger here at Hoffel Broadfield Plantation, a state historic site. We're standing on the beautiful grounds of this plantation that was owned from 1806 to 1973 by the same family. They were Europeans originally. And the people that came here during the time of slavery, most of them came from Sierra Leone. And when the Civil War ended, 3 generations of people from this plantation stayed together. And they had the first generation, second generation, and the grandchildren. When the war ended, the people came back. And today, descendants live within 5 miles of this house on property given to them by this family. And right even to this day, I'll receive a phone call or some sort of connection, and it'll be from one of the descendants of the Hoffel slaves.
My name is Alfreda Grant White. I am a direct descendant of the Hoffel Broadfield Plantation. My grandfather worked as a caretaker on the plantation for many years. As a child growing up, I can remember going down those long roads with oak trees draping over the top.
The people that attend the Needwood Church are from Hoffel Plantation. Originally, it's my understanding that the church was actually on this property and was later moved down to the Needwood community on the land that this family, the plantation owners, had. And it's so important. There's not only the church, but there's a one-room schoolhouse that was used also by the Geechee Gullah people from Hoffel Broadfield Plantation.
After the Civil War, it was difficult for rural African American children to get an education. Slaves had been forbidden to read and write, and they wanted education for their children. But for most black children in the rural South, little one-room schools, such as Needwood, were the only access to it. Very few of these schools have survived.
The teacher who taught at that school was also my first grade teacher as well as my mother's first grade teacher. And that would be Miss Susie Anderson, and her son Charles is sitting back here on the, third row. And I think overall that's the whole meaning for having a church, is that usually it's an area to gather, to get families and groups of people together. And that's what Needwood did. There are so many good stories about this church that I can remember, and I know many others in here can remember, because it really, really brought the community together.
My name is Dana Roberts, and I used to recall my grandmother Teen, and I would hear the stories of how she attended the Needwood Elementary School, the one-room classroom, until she was about in the 4th grade. And after that, she also worked on the plantation. And at that time, it was a dairy farm. And I do remember them stories when she would churn butter and work out there. But also, our family have always been connected to our history and our roots out here at Harford Plantation. It's so amazing that we can actually go touch where we came from. And I remember telling people that we can go back 7, 8 generations. And before that, we think it was from out of Sierra Leone or out of Senegal. So it's just amazing to be a part of such a wonderful history. And the culture here is, we Gullah Geechee people, and we love who we are. And I just, I'm very proud to be a descendant of Harford Plantation.
Low down chariot, let me ride. Low down chariot, let me ride. I got a father on that chariot, let me ride. I got a father on that chariot, let me ride. I got a father on that chariot, let me ride. Low down chariot, let me ride. Oh, low down chariot, let me ride. Oh, low down chariot, let me ride. Low down chariot, let me ride. Low down chariot, let me ride. All right. Yeah. Hold on.
Not a lot of us really wanted to accept our culture when we were younger, and it fascinated me. Another gentleman that's almost my age, he's about 5 or 6 years older than I am, very famous, sits on the Supreme Court, Clarence Thomas. He's a Geechee just like I am. And he talks about when he was younger that, well, you know, it wasn't so popular back then to be a Geechee. And that helped me because it wasn't popular in my community also, and many of my mentors that's older than me, is the fact that we kind of shunned away from it. Now all of us are beginning to embrace it because you should be proud of your heritage. You should be proud of your culture. And now I'm very proud of being a Georgia saltwater Geechee, as one of my dear friends, Cornelius Bailey, used to say, but I'm proud to be a Gullah Geechee. And that's another whole story, because there's a lot of questions about Gullah and Geechee. And, but that would be, to me, the most significant thing, is going from, well, I don't want anybody to know I'm Gullah Geechee, to the point now we're shouting it from the rooftops. So. And we try to do that with ourselves, our families, and our grandchildren, and anybody want to listen in America and around the world. So I like that new change.
One of the strong Gullah Geechee traditions is the celebration of their music. Much of it was used to pass down oral history and stories to the younger generation.
It's about the Igbo tribe that came over from West Africa, and they came to St. Simon Island. And when they got there, they realized where they were going. So they decided, rather than be a slave, they would drown themselves they had to become flying spirits to get back to Mother Africa. So when the ship landed at what was called Dunbar Creek, which is now called Ebo's Landing, those slaves that were free in Ebo land got off that ship. And instead of going to the shore, they walked out into the ocean. And a number of them drowned themselves so that they could go back, become flying spirits, and go back to Mother Africa. So we dedicate this hymn to those flying spirits.
Now give me two wings, yeah, to veil my face. Now give me two wings, yeah, to veil my face. Now give me two wings, to fly away, so the world can't do me no harm.
Much of Georgia's early history is rooted in the coastal region. The rise of the Rice Kings and the slavery required to support it is a dark period of that history. Today we celebrate that extraordinary culture and the rural churches that were the center of it.
Rock of Ages left for me. Let me hide myself in thee. Let the water and the blood from thy wounded side which flow be a sin, the double cure, save from wrath and make.
Bethany Presbyterian, considered to be the mother of Presbyterian churches in Georgia, was formed in 1786, just after the Creek Indian Treaty of 1763. In her cemetery rest many prominent early Georgia settlers and veterans who came to this part of Georgia just after the Revolutionary War. The church is located in a remote part of eastern Greene County. In this remote and bucolic setting, a very important event in Georgia history took place on August 16, 1886. Hundreds of people filled the church and spilled into the yard. Excitement was in the air. Dr. James Woodrow, one of the most prominent academics and theologians in America, was to be tried by his peers in the Augusta Presbytery on the charge of heresy.
Dr. James Woodrow was born in 1828 in Carlisle, England, and early developed a passion for science. After a brilliant career at Jefferson College in Canonsburg, Pennsylvania, he was invited to study with the famed 19th century naturalist Louis Agassiz at Harvard's Lawrence Scientific School. Said that science and religion should be in harmony, that science should progress through honest experimentation, and that religion should proceed through reasonable exegesis of the scriptures. He said if both were done properly, then there should be nothing but harmony between the two.
The chief protagonist for the prosecution was Dr. William Adams of the Augusta Presbytery. Dr. Adams takes the podium.
How did God create man? Was it by some long process of evolution from the body of an insect or frog? In some way or another, this frog got ashore, and that, brethren of this assembly, was the landing of your first ancestor. Certainly not. On this question, the scriptures are unequivocal. God created man from the dust of the ground, and woman from the rib of man.
Dr. Woodrow will defend himself.
It is contended by those who believe me guilty that the dust of the ground refers to sand or clay, inorganic matter. However, you must ask yourself this question. Is it not possible that the dust of the ground refers to organic matter? That is to say, the decayed remains of animal and plant life. Remember, God often tells us what he's going to do without telling us the method by which he will do it.
Dr. Woodrow was found not guilty. Some members of the church still recall the occasion, passed down from one generation to the next.
My name is Robert Simpson. I've been in the church all my life. My daddy's mama and her sister boarded both sides of the trial, and they'd get them at supper time. They'd get them to talking about it. Then they would meet up later and discuss what this one said and that one said. So that's why my daddy got most of his.
America would be conflicted by the subject of evolution for many years. Dr. Woodrow's trial took place fully 40 years before the Scopes monkey trial, made famous in the movie Inherit the Wind. Dr. Woodrow went on to an illustrious career and became president of the University of South Carolina. However, he is most famously recognized as the favorite uncle of a future president of the United States and his namesake, Woodrow Wilson. Not too far from Bethany is the oldest Catholic church in Georgia. Established in 1792 near the small crossroads town of Sharon, once a thriving agricultural village in Tolliver County. Sharon was incorporated in 1884. Not much left of it now except a few old buildings. The official name is the Church of the Purification of the Blessed Virgin Mary, referred to in one history as the cradle of Catholicity in Georgia. The structure you see here was built in 1883 when Sharon was thriving. There was also a school next door that was the first Roman Catholic school in Georgia. Unfortunately, the school is gone, but the church is still with us in this beautiful rural setting. The site of the original church was a couple of miles away, where the historic Locust Grove Cemetery is located.
We are seated in the Church of the Purification of the Blessed Virgin Mary, the first Catholic church in Georgia. The actual church we're in was built consecrated in 1883, and it is the successor to the original church, which was simply a log cabin built about 2 miles from here in a little community known as Locust Grove. The community of Locust Grove was established in 1790 when a group of about 50 or 60 English Catholics came to Georgia from Maryland.
Later, several French families left their homeland to escape the turmoil of their own revolution and made their way to a new life in this agricultural Eden. They were joined by several Irish families, and they all became part of the Locust Grove community. Tombstones with names such as O'Sullivan, Villabonto, Sims, and O'Donohoe attest to their presence. In the pre-Civil War years, slaves were an active part of the church. Marriages were performed in the church as well as other Catholic rituals, such as christenings.
Following the move of the church to Sharon, the little community of Locust Grove virtually died away. There's simply no trace of it today other than the cemetery, which is quite historic and on the National Register of Historic Places now. And the gravestones there are wonderful monuments to a bygone era in that cemetery.
The church had been virtually inactive for decades and was rapidly declining. Fortunately, a group of Catholics from Atlanta and other nearby locations were able to raise some funds for the renovation of the church and to establish a Catholic cultural center. The old church has become vibrant once again.
Temptation comes my way. When I cannot stand, I'll fall on you. Jesus, you're my hope and stay. Lord, I need you.
Many of our historic rural churches are no longer with us. Those that remain should be treasured and preserved so that future generations can understand our history and put that history in the proper context. The Purification Church serves as a shining example.
Defense, my righteousness, oh God, how I need